Let's say you're climbing a mountain, right? And you can choose a trail that's kind of, horizontal. So you just go around the mountain and, you see different views, but you're not climbing. You're not gaining any elevation. And that's akin to change, right? So you're doing different things, but you're not really growing. Versus transition is like take the vertical route. So you're actually going up the mountain. So when you go up the mountain, that's transition and that's transformational. You see different views from you did before. Like you see higher up elevation. So you're growing. What we were just talking about in that it's growth. The more you push yourself up the mountain, then the more it's transformational growth.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Coachful Coaching Leadership Podcast. I am here today with Kavita Ahuja. Did I say that right?
Yes, you did.
Score. All right.
Yes.
Well, Kavita, why don't I give you the mic for 30 seconds to introduce yourself and what you do?
Thank you. Thank you so much, David. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today. And, especially I love this topic, your topic of your podcast being leadership and how we can kind of lead in our lives as well. So that's kind of, I think, what led me to what I'm doing today, because I wanted to lead my life a little bit differently. So I am a career and life transitions coach. I'm also a podcaster. I'm a course creator. I'm a writer. I'm a speaker. But I wasn't always those things. I was previously in the pharmaceutical industry for 25 years, actually, in Canada, in sales and progressively higher sales positions in my life. And very successful at it. I really did enjoy my previous career when I was doing it, and I loved my customers, loved my people I worked with, and all the learnings. But then there came a point, David, in my life around the time I turned 50, where I began to question things. And I talk a lot about this little voice in my head that I started speaking to me, like, is this it? Right? Is this how I want to lead my life? Is what I'm doing aligned with my purpose, my reason for being? And those are really scary questions. And I think a lot of people who may be listening might experience that. So needless to say, it was scary to even think about changing or transitioning into something different. And that's what stops people in a lot of ways. So, but I did. And I decided to take the leap, and I left my job. I left my career of 25 years, and I embarked on a journey of rediscovery, and which led me to realize that other people are also going through this, and my calling was to help them. And so that's what I'm doing now.
Well, that's beautiful, Kavita. And thank you very much for sharing that. You said to me, be the leader of your life.
Yes.
And it sounds like you've been the leader of your life. What's that mean to you?
Great question. We often think when the term leader comes out, and as I was thinking about today and this conversation, I was thinking, when people kind of think of leadership, often it's the titles, right? Whether we're in C-suite or whatever role we play, and we play a lot of roles in life. But I think that in order for people to really live a life of fulfillment and happiness, they have to lead it the way that their internal being kind of wants it to lead. Like, what is your reason for being? What is a combination of your strengths, your passions, and your values? And are you living that to the fullest? And if you're not, then there's going to be some unhappiness or some, lack of fulfillment. So that's what I mean by it. And I think a lot of people may, kind of go through life kind of on blinders, or kind of, just kind of going through the motions. And I don't want that for people, and that's when people come to me, they're often confused or overwhelmed with life, and they just haven't taken the time to really stop and question, like, what am I doing? Who am I really? And what do I want moving forward? So I think that's what I mean by leading your life the way you want it to be. And and being true to yourself, being authentic to who you really are. Does that
Yeah.
make sense? Or
that makes a lot of sense. And
yeah.
and the question that comes to mind right away when you say that is, I think we train ourselves to ignore some of the voices that might be
Mm-hmm.
nagging us and might be saying something to us, that little inner voice or inner voices that many of us have. And I guess like when you think about, when for yourself as an example, you said you reached the point where you said something needs to change.
Mm-hmm.
How did you know it was time to change?
Because I was not excited to wake up on Monday morning and go to the same thing that I've been doing for so long. I was not, everything was just okay, David. Like it was okay. It was fine. That word fine, though, isn't the way we should be living our life. We should be living our life with, I don't know, excitement and eagerness. And, it sounds, of course, we have things that we have to do, right? Like we talked about earlier, how before we got on the call, how busy we don't remember what happened this week or whatever. But ultimately, if you're just kind of going through the motions in life, then you know that. And if you're stressed, like if you're overwhelmed, if you don't even have time to take care of yourself, then I think those are indications that things need to change.
Yeah. Now, how do we know though? How does an individual know? Is it just a moment in time where they're feeling the stress? It's just a moment in time. They might just be, like I had a friend recently said, "Hey, I almost rage quit a few times for my job."
Yeah.
But there was a realization. Okay, it's a moment in time, and I guess that's a pretty profound question, because how do you know when it's just a moment in time type of, this sucks, I want to quit, I want to do something else. And how
Mm-hmm.
do you know when it's something bigger, a bigger transition you need to make in your life, a bigger change
Mm-hmm.
you need to make in your life? What have you
Mm-hmm.
seen there in the differentiating the two?
Yeah, that I love your really insightful questions. It's a great the one of the I think maybe if I go back and kind of describe what is a difference really between transition and change, would that kind of help?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, the reason I wanted, because I was very fascinated in this whole concept of transition. Like what causes these things? Like what do people actually pause to, like, just as to your question? And so I studied it, and I actually I studied and learned from a woman. Her name is Linda Rossetti, and she's an expert on transitions. And she has a great definition. I'll read it to you. As transition is an incredible invitation to unlock the enormous potential that is resident within each of us. So transition is a period, and it can be, so there's three parts of it. There's a trigger, something that triggers it, right? It can either be a
Hmm.
minor trigger or like in kind of a over time, like I had, that little voice, or it can be
Hmm.
major triggers, like major events that happen in our life, like divorce or a layoff or health scare that causes us to pause and say, oh my God, like stop in our tracks and think, the decision is, what do we do now? That's the second part of the transition. And then the third is taking action. Like, so do I act on this trigger, right?
Hmm.
Do I act on the voice, or do I act on, the layoff? What do I do next? Right.
Hmm.
So, so it is a really, if you look at it as, and I try to share that transition, you can look at it as a negative, or you can look at it as an opportunity, and that's what the definition implies.
Okay.
Um, so, but the difference between, often we think, okay, well, we can fix things,
Hmm.
by changing circumstances, like we'll just get a new job, or maybe we'll just get another position in the same company. Everything will get fixed,
Hmm.
or
Yep.
we'll just move, move cities or whatever. Like band-aid things that are,
We'll have kids, and kids will make things better. It'll create
yeah,
less
we're always
chaos.
always the next. We'll do this, and then I'll be happy, or we'll do that. Whereas we don't. Those are kind of temporary fixes. And that's the
Mm.
difference kind of between change and transition. Transition encourages us to really dig deep and understand why. Why is this happening? Right.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
does that
Yeah. No,
answer?
that
Yeah.
that that's excellent insight. So how do you help people? And if you can talk about a little bit about like, what are some major transitions you've seen individuals try to make, and how do you help
Hmm.
them through that?
Yeah, good question. So I, as a result of, my own transition, I kind of documented, how did I do this? Like, what is important to take people through in order to, and it's not like a quick fix, right? It takes deep introspection, right? So I developed a system, or a framework called the Pyramid of Reinvention. So really, there's 6
Mm-hmm.
steps. And in those steps, it first starts with really rediscovering who you are. By that, I mean, what are your, so I take my clients through this process where there's a huge amount of tools and exercises we go through, digging deep into these questions. What are your biggest strengths? Like, what is your superpowers? What do people come to you for that you naturally are really good at?
Mm-hmm.
Celebrate yourself. A lot of people don't do that. What are your passions? Like, what have you maybe buried that you've passions that you buried, that, like when you were a child, did you love to do that you could spend hours in doing? And can you bring
Mm-hmm.
that into today?
Mm-hmm.
What values do you have that maybe are changing? Maybe your values have changed. Maybe you want to contribute more to society versus climbing up the
Yeah.
ladder, right? So, it culminates in what I call, or the concept of ikigai, finding your ikigai, which is your reason for being.
Mm-hmm.
And then David would go through, what are your visions for yourself? What are the blocks that you have that are stopping you from achieving that vision? What are your, how do you get the confidence to do this? And then it's all about action and accountability. So it's really a step-by-step process that
Mm-hmm.
I take people, my clients through. And you asked about some examples. Um, I'm primarily, I coach women, but I can, it's not only for women. But for example, one of my clients who came to me was very lost. She had a business. She had her own business, which
Mm-hmm.
was very successful at one point, but then it turned around and she had to actually close the business down. So she had to shut it down. And that business had become such a integral part of her identity that she didn't even know who she was anymore. She said, I'm sitting here at, I'm 50 something, 52, I think she was. I don't even know what to do next. So she was at a real transition phase in her life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so taking her through this process, she discovered things about herself that she had forgotten, or she didn't even know she enjoyed doing. So
Mm-hmm.
she ended up realizing that her passion was really food, wine, entertainment, and totally different from what she was doing before,
Mm-hmm.
but it was possible. So she took courses, she became a sommelier, or she's in the process of becoming a sommelier.
Mm-hmm.
She's moved cities, she's found an amazing relationship. So it's interesting, because when you dig deep and really discover what your reason for being is, it opens up so much of this, what is called anabolic energy, positive energy, that opens up possibilities that you maybe have never seen before. So that's just one example of kind of a drastic change, right, in a person's life as a result of going through this process.
Yeah. What, hearing what you said there, Kavita, it brings up the word potential. And I'm curious then, like, what do you think holds people back from reaching their full potential?
Mm. Whoa, how much time do you have?
Uh, All day? Let's go.
um, I guess what holds people back mainly, if you could put one word, it is fear. It's really fear, right?
Mm.
It's fear of many different ways that fear would show up. And it could be fear that I'm not good enough. I'm not qualified enough to do this thing. So why should I even bother?
Mm-hmm.
Fear of what is judgment. What will people say if I do this? And I had all these, by the way, before I even
Mm-hmm.
left, left and did and went through this career transition. A fear of what are people going to say? What is it? What will everything, what are the judgment of people, whether it's around you or even society, right? Because we all play these roles.
Mhm.
And also there's a fear of success. Like what actually will happen if I actually make it? And then what am I going to do? So I think what these things that block us are called in my training, they're called energy blocks. So
Mhm.
there's different types. There's inner critics. There's assumptions we make about our lives, about what we
Mhm.
should be doing. There's different interpretations of situations that stop us, and obviously the big one is limiting beliefs that we have,
Yeah.
that society places on us. So there's a lot of things that stop us in our tracks, but those are some of the big ones. Yes.
Limiting beliefs, assumptions we make, um,
Yes.
fear of failure, fear of success. Which one of those, like when I say those out loud, which one do you feel like has the biggest impact on the people you work with?
I think it's that I'm not good enough.
Not
That
good
that
enough.
that yeah, that's it. That's definitely an inner critic, and it's called the gremlin in our heads.
Yeah.
If you picture like this monster or whatever, however you want to picture it, that comes and visits us quite a bit, and maybe sits on our
Yep.
shoulders, and as we're embarking on something new, we'll say, "Oh no, 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 you can't do this because you're way outside your league here. So stay in your little zone of your little box, your little comfort zone, and everything will be
Mm-hmm.
fine." Right. So it's a matter of retraining your brain and retraining those thoughts. And because everything originates with your own thoughts, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's retraining it and saying, no, actually, I'm actually good. I actually don't need to be put in the safe box that you want to keep me in.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Instead, I'm going to use your energy in a different way, and I've got this. So it's almost as if that's one of the methods to reduce this block of this inner critic, is by actually just um, putting it away, like taking it away from the scene, if you may.
Yeah.
So.
The gremlins in the head. I like that. So we talk a lot about those gremlins in the head on this
Hmm.
podcast and how you address it. And I've always been very curious. Every guest who talks about inner critic or that little voice, or someone just said to me, I have many voices who talk to me and
Yes.
say I can't do it. How do you talk to those gremlins in the head?
Myself.
Yeah. How do you talk to it?
Yeah. I do pretty much what I just described. I
Yeah.
will firstly, the most important thing, David, is to actually acknowledge that gremlin. I'm going to say it's like a thing, right? That gremlin actually is present. Oh, here it is again. Okay, here you are, and then ask, why are you actually here?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I go through. It's okay. Why is it here? Because it's trying to keep me safe. And then you can use several methods. And what I do is often I'll just put it away. I'll just say, okay, I don't need you anymore. Or I'll also give myself positive affirmations, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I'll say to myself often, everything always works out for me. You've got this. I
Mm-hmm.
talk to myself. It sounds silly,
Mm-hmm.
but I do.
Yeah.
And just changing, stopping the thoughts before they spiral into the negative, and switching them to the positive thoughts, which again creates that anabolic
Yeah.
positive energy. So that's how I talk to myself, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's power in first of all, acknowledging, like some people say, I
Hmm.
squash it or ignore it. You can't. It's part of you.
Mm-hmm.
It's really just yourself talking to yourself.
Exactly. Yes.
There's a lot of power in just acknowledging the situation,
Hmm.
and instead of like denying it. Hey, I'm doubting myself. But then
Yes.
what you're saying there's like reframing,
Reframing.
reframing, reframing, and for some people it's positive reframing. Some people, they need to talk a little more, uh,
Hmm.
negatively with themselves, whatever works
Hmm.
for the individual, right?
Yeah.
It's the reframing of the situation
Right.
and looking at it in a different way.
But
That's going to help you.
yeah, I would also say though that it's not like a one-time thing. I think it's something that we have to really train ourselves, and we also really have to kind of do it on a daily basis. And
Hmm.
that's a lot of the things that I suggest is, developing a routine, if it's a morning routine or an evening routine, whatever it is that will center you and give you that positive energy to move forward and be confident in yourself, right? So
Yeah.
it's really about confidence.
Yeah. It's interesting there too. Like, just the concept, like this is called a practice for a reason. Just like how you
Mm-hmm,
need to practice cooking, you need to practice, like your friend who's a sommelier, you have to practice tasting different wines.
mm-hmm,
If you're,
mm-hmm,
if
mm-hmm.
you want to be able to bake a cake, well, I still suck at it. You have to practice. You can't just be like, well, it didn't work this time or the second time.
Yes.
I'm just not a good baker. It's the same thing as, how you talk to yourself and the work you do with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like I like to talk about meditation sometimes. Overachiever in me used to think, well, if I have thoughts coming across my brain, if I can't focus, I'm just not good at this. And it's not.
Mm-hmm.
It's it's being okay with that. It's being
Mm-hmm.
okay with that stuff. Like sitting still and thinking despite everything else. And
Mm. Or not
it's
thinking.
reframing. Yeah.
Yeah,
And it's
right.
okay either
Or just
way. And
emptying your
being okay.
brain if it's
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so yeah, you're always going to have that voice, and
Yeah.
just because you practice it doesn't mean it it, it removes itself, right? It gets
Right.
quieter,
Yes.
but it's always going to be there, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So
And
it's a
and and
point
then don't beat
yeah,
yourself up. Don't beat yourself up about it either, really. I mean,
yeah.
everybody has these, and that's the way we move forward. Honestly, like if the only way to have growth is to accept and acknowledge and then just move on, right? And say that, okay, we're here, but that's the only way that we have you know, I guess what is called transformational growth, right?
Yeah.
And there's another little, maybe I'll share, there's another little kind of metaphor that I thought would be interesting is, when you're like between change and transition, just going back to that a bit.
Mm-hmm.
If you're like, let's say you're climbing a mountain, right? And you can choose a trail that's kind of, um, horizontal. So you just go around the mountain
Mm-hmm.
and you see different views, but you're not climbing, you're not gaining any elevation, and that's akin to change, right? So you're doing
Mm-hmm.
different things, but you're not really growing.
Mm-hmm.
Versus transition is like you take the vertical route, so you're actually going up the mountain. So
Mm-hmm.
when you go up the mountain, that's transition and that's transformational. You see different views from you did before,
Mm-hmm.
like you see higher up elevation, so you're growing. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know why that came into my head, but it just kind of related to what we were just talking about, and that it's growth. The more you push yourself up the mountain,
Mm-hmm.
then the more it's transformational growth.
Mm, yeah. And so in your mind, like transition is like, it's just, I was going to just use the same words, it's a form of change, but it's a more significant change, right? Whereas like
Hmm.
the change is just kind of like, all right, like we're making little tweaks here and there. Transition
Yeah,
is like, no, I'm doing something
yeah,
very different here,
yeah. And it can
in an
be in
aspect of
different
my
parts
life.
of your life. I mean, it can be in different
Yeah.
parts of your life. It's not just in midlife or whatever, but it can be, when you're younger. It's like what decision you're making
Yeah.
to go, what career you decide, or who
Yeah.
you decide to marry, or what are you going to do after you retire? So there's all these different phases, and those are all
Yeah.
important. Yes.
So Kavita, with everything you're doing, what's the legacy you want to leave?
Wow. You asked really deep questions. uh, I really believe that the legacy I want to make is that I think that whoever I can influence or inspire to look at their lives and lead their lives according to their reason for being.
Mm-hmm.
If they live their life with their sole purpose, and they so that the legacy is, I don't want people to regret their life when they look back when they're 90 and say, I wish I could have done that. I
Mm-hmm.
wish I did that. So if I even have any form or any aspect or part of that in somebody's life, or however hundreds or thousands or millions of people, then I would be very happy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, That's that's beautiful because so I've been asking a number of guests this question or a similar question recently.
Yes.
So I'm experimenting, and it's very interesting. Is the common thread of the folks that I've had on here is
Mm-hmm.
first of all there's some shared values that we have,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
the one of the common threads I'm seeing so far is the concept of being able to serve other people and help others. There's this common thread amongst everyone I've
Mm-hmm.
talked to. It's not
Mm.
this selfish something for me and me.
Yes.
It's there's something about helping others that you and mm, basically every other guest I've talked to have in common, and
Why
it's
do you think
wonderful
that
that
is? Why do you think that is?
um, it could be a bias in the guests I've chosen. No, unconsciously, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think so. My knee jerk reaction to your question is, I think the people I have on this podcast, like we're talking about leadership, we're talking about the role of coaching there,
Mm-hmm.
and it's leadership in your life, leadership in a corporation. It doesn't matter.
Yes.
It's individuals who have hit and who've done a lot of self actualization, like the self
Yes.
work, to
Yes.
realize what impact they want to have. And it's not age dependent, but experiences does influence the individuals on this podcast. But that's the common thread everyone shares, is that everyone has came to a point, hit some sort of wall,
Mm.
some proverbial wall, and realized that there's something more I'm
Mm-hmm.
trying to do here. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
on this earth to do something more.
Mm-hmm.
And and the story I'd like to share with folks when they ask me that question is, going to funerals is both a sad occasion, but also a learning opportunity. Because what
Mm.
you learn outside of the sadness is how a person is remembered is not their titles, is not all the accolades, is by the impact they had on the people around them. That's what
Mm.
creates sadness. Now, that
Mm.
impact could either be very bad or it could be to the positive, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
it's what you choose to have. And
Yes.
um, so long story to
No, that's
a
great. I
quick
love that.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you and everyone else has done that work and
Yeah.
truly, asked that
I see.
question.
Yeah. I think people are really, I don't know, maybe I see it because I'm doing this work now, but I think also maybe because of with COVID, for example, a lot of people after that started relooking at their life.
Hmm.
You heard of the Great Resignation. Not saying that everybody has to quit their jobs, but what I'm saying is that I think there's more in the world. There's a lot more of this awareness of this kind of concept of like we can do more than our roles define us. So we don't have to be defined by these roles. We can
Hmm.
create our own roles. We can lead again the life that we want to lead if we really take the time to figure that out. So,
Yeah. Um, there's one belief I've had, and I don't think it's changed too much, is that I do believe that you got to disrupt yourself before
hmm
something external beyond your control disrupts you. And that
mm,
disruption could be learn, you know, learning more about yourself, learning more about others, learning more about the world. But the more you try to artificially disrupt yourself and create some of this artificial transition in some ways,
yes,
the more
yes,
you get used to it. So when there is some external factor like COVID that was beyond
mm,
all of our control,
hmm
the the transitions that many of us, I would argue all of us, had to go through, for those who've done a lot of the work, it's not as drastic. It's not foreign to
right,
rethink your life, right? Because
right,
I've known many people, I'm sure you have too, who had to really, really, really rethink their profession
hmm
or how
hmm
they spent their time. People who've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on education, became medical doctors. They re I know people who've rethought, is this worth it?
yes,
Right? Yes, I'm making
yes,
good money. So what?
yes,
Right? Is
yes,
this what I
yeah,
truly want to do? Or is it because mom and dad and my neighbors and cousins said, I have to do this job. I have to
Yeah.
become a doctor.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. A lot
so
of, yeah, I mean, a lot of us have, are brought up like I have, like I'm Indian and, was raised to have that, get the education, get the great job, get married, have kids. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's just how we were traditionally raised. And
Mhm.
it's do we move away from that or do we follow the societal expectations that have been placed on us, and a lot of that is because of limiting beliefs like, oh, you can't do this because you're a woman or whatever it is, whatever
Mhm.
the limiting belief is at the time. And so
Yeah.
I think you're talking about people who challenge those limiting beliefs, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not necessarily a bad framework what you described there, like traditional families put on you, like, oh
No,
yeah,
not at all.
like
No.
go get education and everything. It is in the vein of safety and security, and there's nothing wrong with stability in life.
Not at all.
But it's the way it's done and the way it's implemented, just like everything else. It's how you do it, how you articulate it, how you try to
Hmm.
supposedly motivate others to fall in line with that. That's where things go really wrong
Yeah.
in society. So, oh, you must get married by X and X time and have X number of kids, and you must do this. And like, well, maybe
Yes.
the timings are a bit off
Right.
compared to my
Right.
timing of when that should happen or if it should happen is different.
Exactly.
And
Yes.
yeah. Two more questions for you, Kavita.
Uh-huh.
So if you had a time machine and you can go back and give the previous version of yourself some advice, what would it be?
Don't hesitate. Like, don't hesitate because I hesitated for a little while, quite a while actually, before I decided to do that big transition in my life because of that fear
Mhm.
that we talked about. And I'm glad that I, did finally do it. But
Mhm.
um, who knows if I had done it a little earlier, how could have my life been different? So I would say I would have told myself, don't hesitate, don't stop yourself. Instead, listen to your voice
Mm,
earlier. Listen to
yeah.
that inner voice earlier, and it's telling you something. It's there for a reason, and I don't regret any of it for sure. Like it's not that. It's just that sometimes I wonder, like if I had done this earlier in my life, how would it have changed?
Hmm.
But I think that's what comes to mind.
Okay. Listen to that voice.
Yes.
All right. Last question I've been asking every guest. What's one question I haven't asked you yet that I should have asked?
You stumped me on that one. One question you should have asked. Um, I think I'd like you to ask me about a little bit more about energy, and what I mean by that is how do we bring that positive energy into our life and how do we define that and why is it important? So,
Okay. Well, why is it important?
so there's two types of energy. I was kind of referred to them. There's positive anabolic energy and there's negative catabolic energy.
Hmm.
And in every situation in our life, whether it's on a daily basis or when you're under stress, there's those, you can bring those. And energy by that, I mean, is like, what are your thoughts, feelings, actions? That's what that my training has. And if we stop and think about everything that we do in our lives on a daily basis, if you're in a meeting and you have, some of the negative thoughts are like uh, conflict or anger, that only brings about this catabolic restrictive energy that doesn't allow for opportunity and for collaboration, right?
Hmm.
So I think we're all connected energetically. That's why I'm here. That's why we met, right? But how can you bring in whatever you do? How can you bring more positive energy in your life? What drives you when you do things that you're passionate about? That brings up positive energy in your life, anabolic energy. Even
Mm,
in your work, like how do you deal with teams? How do you lead? Are you a positive anabolic leader or a negative leader? Like, do you blame? Do you, so it's all around that concept, which I think is really important for people. It sounds sometimes when you bring that word energy up, people think it's a woo-woo, but I think it's really, it can be related to what you're doing at your work, in your personal life, or any part of your life, actually. So
Yeah.
does that make
Well,
sense?
excellent. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
makes a lot of sense. Thanks, Kavita. That
Yeah,
that
you're
makes a
welcome.
lot of sense. And when people say woo, and I was one of those people for a long time too. I think we have to realize that we use metaphors in every area of our life
Mm-hmm.
to understand things. We use models. It's not just in science where we use models to understand something that,
Mm-hmm.
these are imperfect, but it works, right? It
Mm-hmm.
works as a
Mm-hmm.
model. And I think talking about, something is your energy anabolic or catabolic? Well, that's actually synonymous to how when, we eat food, right? And
Mm-hmm.
the energy, is it creating anabolic, right? Like,
Right, right.
or is it catabolic?
Building up
Yeah,
energy. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah, building up energy, or is it catabolic? Does it
Mm-hmm.
actually, have a net
Mm-hmm.
effect of like eating through things, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, so, you know, models are models, and it helps
Mm-hmm.
us understand the world and
Mm-hmm.
about ourselves as well. So,
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Actually, there's
well, yeah,
the model is the 7 levels of energy, and it's a book written by Bruce Schneider, who's a founder of my coaching program, and it's very interesting. And actually, we do something called the Energy Leadership Index Assessment, which is an attitudinal assessment, which
mm,
can be done in organizations. It can be done individually. It's very eye-opening.
yeah,
Just as an aside, yeah.
excellent. Well, Vita, it's been almost 40 minutes.
Oh, has it? Oh, see,
Yeah, yeah,
a lot of
36
anabolic
minutes.
energy there.
Yeah, yeah. No, let's sum it out now. Enjoy the day, enjoy the sunlight. Well, look, I appreciate you making the time to join me here today. Um, Anything else you'd like to say to the audience before we go?
Just, I really enjoy the conversation, and I think what you're doing is really important. People need to know what kind of leaders they are, both in professionally and in their life. And I think all that we discussed hopefully will, will inspire you to really dig deep and figure out what it is that really is your reason for being. And maybe that if it's not aligned, then maybe it's a time to kind of search for that.
Beautiful. Well, thanks, Kavita. I'm going to stop the recording now.
Okay, thank you.